So the very first thing we have to do here is actually create a template for actually making our arc. Now that arc is a 1 in 7, so 1 inch in 7 inches. So what I'm going to do is use a pair of dividers here, and if you actually have a carpenter square you can do this. This cutting mat I've got here actually has the mark out here, so I can come across 1 inch and up 7 over here and get my marking. So let me just quickly get this going. I know I'm going to have to open these almost fully up, and so I'm going to mark it on my 1 inch marking here, bring it up 7 and then adjust it until it sits right on that corner apex of it right there. And there we have it. So that's just very simple. If you don't actually have a marking to do that, just mark across 1 inch and then up 7 and then hit your dividers onto that using a ruler and you'll get there. So once you've got your marking on your dividers, you want to grab your blade. This is from the brand new Stanley Bailey because that's the one we're going to be converting. Because these planes have a nice wide mouth on them, they're perfect for using as a rough removal plane. And the shorter sole I think is better than a number 5. The number 4s just work better because you're not going to take the high spots, you're just going to run straight through, which is all you really want with a rough removal plane. So what I like to do when I make this template is to just grab the blade, and you can make one for your narrower blades and one for your wider blades. And I just like to run a line that's pretty rough on that side so I know roughly how wide it is. And I just want to run that line all the way down. Now what I want to do is find the central point here, and so that is sitting right here. Take your marking at this end as well. Draw that line right through, because that's what you want to line up with your blade so you get your arc centralized on your blade. That's the whole purpose of it. So now that we've got these lines, we can now take our dividers. If you've got a compass divider, that's even better for this because you can just pencil the line straight in. But what you want to do is come in, put it on your central line right down the bottom, or as close to the bottom as you can get it. So what I've done is now scratch that into my cardboard here. And now I can draw that line in, and you can see it's not a very aggressive arc at all. It's a 1 in 7 arc, but it does mean that when you cut, the central area on your blade is going to take a nice deep cutting versus the outside edges, which is what you want. So now we need to just cut this template out. And now I can get rid of this cutting mat. What you want to do is grab a waterproof permanent marker, because we're going to be dipping the blade to stop it overheating, and I'll talk about that in a sec. You just want to have a permanent marker that's not going to wash off with the water, which some of them can do. And you want to grab your blade, whichever blade you're using, and also that template that you've just created. So now what you really want to do is you can find the central spot on your blade, but if you've done a template like I did, and this takes out the need to actually mark it, this is already the thickness of my blade. So I can actually just line it straight up on here and I can get to work. So what I want to do is touch the arc of it right on the very tip here where I can. And so I'm just going to place that back. Now I've got my permanent marker, so I've got the very tip here. And I want to mark, and this is on the back of your blade. So if you look at this now, you can hopefully see that permanent marker just sitting on the top here, and that's what we need to remove. So in order to do this, I'm going to be using just this Ryobi bench grinder. This is 2,850 RPM. If you've got a slow speed grinder, that'll be even easier to do this with, just so you don't heat your steel up as much. If you've got a whetstone grinder, like a Tormek or something, you can do that on there as well. I'm not going to do that on there because most of those grinders are out of the reach of most of you. And a bench grinder such as this is definitely within your grasp. If you've got one of those little hand crank ones, and if I did, I'd be using that to show you how to use one of those. But I haven't been able to get a hold of one of them, so we're going to be using the power today. So what I'm going to do is just set this up, and then I'll talk you through what I'm going to do, and then we'll get into it. You want to have this stop coming in so you can actually bring this in flat, and we're going to take one side and then the other. Now, you want to have a container of water sitting here that you can dunk the blade into so it doesn't heat up. You also don't want to wear gloves when you do this, because you've got your thumb on here and you're actually working it. You'll actually feel the heat build up, and when it starts feeling hot on your thumb, that's when you want to dunk it. Remember, PPE, we want to use PPE, correct PPE here. Bit of safety with these friable discs. Do be careful, don't take your cover here off, they can explode. There's not much chance of that happening, I don't find. I've used it quite a few times and have never really had an issue, but it can happen, so just be careful of that. I have taken the guard here off that sits there so you guys can see, and also because it's broken since this is out of the 90s. So let's get into it without further ado. I'm going to work through this, and I'm going to get you up nice and close so you can see exactly what I'm doing. So I just like to dunk it when I first start before I do this, so I'm going to turn this on. Now, come in flat. And I just like to do very small passes like this. Now, the one thing you don't want to do is linger out on these outside corners, because that's where you can ruin the temper. So now we've got this flat spot on the top. We've removed all that permanent marker for the most part. Sometimes there's a little slither left there, but that doesn't really matter. And so now what we need to do is actually shape the bevel to that arc, making sure that you kind of evenly move it from the center. So you can see we're thinning it out here, so this is your guide for how much you need to remove. So you can see here that's already discoloured slightly, and I just touched it and it's hot, so you want to dunk that and try to avoid that. I find when I do this that the bevel doesn't necessarily stay consistent. If you're doing this all the time, you'd probably get a consistent bevel. That's more about trying to lock your arms and kind of keep the same referencing as you turn. And so the bevel is not really what you're looking at too much here. It's more that this arc on the back is correct, because that's what you're cutting with. And so if you look here, I've still got a slight flat on here. Now, I don't want to risk overheating this like I did just on this corner ever so slightly. So we're going to go to the bench stones now and sharpen it there. So I just wanted to take a moment here to tell you to subscribe down below. Make sure you hit the sub notification bell and select all on that if you want to get new episodes, if you've been enjoying this content. So let's get back to it. So now we're coming into bench stones. These are diamonds. You can use whatever you want to use to sharpen this out. All we're going to do is just refine that angle a little bit, make sure we get a nice sharp edge right to the edge, flatten the back, and just run through the grits. So let's get started. So because it's curved, you're just rocking it, and I'll leave the video to where I showed you how to sharpen a curved chisel, which is a gouge, because the process is identical. And so we're just going to keep going until that little flat spot does disappear. Now, if you did want to take that step out and you weren't worried too much about losing the temper on it, which you really don't want to do, you could take that a little bit longer on the grinder and just be very careful and take it right to the edge, but that's really up to you. Now, if you want to come across this way, you can actually just work your stone like this as you're doing it back and forwards, so you can evenly wear the stone. So if you're not using a diamond stone, using a water stone or something, you can just work like this, or you can work in the other direction like this. I usually find this action is a little bit easier and zigzag up my stone. Especially when I've got my setup like this. So now I can feel a decent burr, quite a heavy burr across all of this. So I'm going to move into my next grit, repeat the same process, take that scratch pattern out. Sometimes if you've got a platform like this, I find you can turn it this way as well, makes it a little bit easier. It's really up to you, they're the two options. I generally just leave mine facing this way and just, as I said, work like this. And I can feel that burr again, so I'm going to remove it on the same stone and then move on to my fine stone. Now I've got a burr all the way around there. When I strop this, there's no point in stropping right out to these outside edges. You can modify the chip breaker to get a little bit closer to the edge. So if we look like this, we can actually sit it back here, and if you find you're getting too much vibration in the blade with it sitting like that, you can scoot this up closer, and if you're not cutting too deep, then you can actually just push these corners over. If you want to and you find that those corners are getting in your way and this is dedicated, you can actually use the grinder and just zap those corners of the chip breaker off if you really want to. I prefer just to keep it sitting sort of here with them sticking over a little bit, and that's where I set the chip breaker. Because you're taking such big shavings, you don't even have to be accurately fixed with that chip breaker on there, because generally you're taking very thick shavings that even if you had a hole there, it should skirt straight up over the top of them. So let's throw this back into a plane. So I've got a piece of pine here. Now normally when you would use one of these, you can come across it. And that's how you're going to really honk the material off. You can see that these are coming off very thick. They're easily 1 mil thick. You can also go with the grain. And you can just see how fast you can remove the material. I could go heavier than this. And so what I want to do is just show you what we can do if we do take this. So now this is sticking out a very long way. And you can see when you stick it out too much like that, it catches a lot and it's just much harder, but you can remove material like that, especially across the grain like this. But generally, I don't like to go that aggressive with it because start making a mess, but if you are really hogging it off, you can. But I prefer it to stick out about that millimetre from the sole. Now what I wanted to do is show you another application where you can use one of these planes. Say you want to chamfer this edge. So it's going to take you a while. So as you saw there, I've quickly done that. And I can come in with a smoothing plane. And we're done a much quicker time by using the roughing plane to remove it first. Come in, refine it with smoothing plane, and you're done. There you have it, folks. As you can see, with very little work, you can convert one of these, at least the thinner, older style blades. It's going to be a little harder if you're using one of these more modern steels in something like a Lubin hand plane, which I wouldn't recommend you do this with. The brand new Stanley Baileys, or any of them that have been out for a while, if you can find one of these hand planes with plastic handles, there's a good chance that the mouth will be wide enough that you don't have to do any work there, and you can just convert the blade and get straight to work. And as you can see, even if your angle is not 100% accurate, you want to chase for that 1 in 7 arc, so 1 in 7 inches arc, and you can see it does a pretty good job. Even if your angle does ride off a little bit, as long as you get it sharp, it's going to do the work you require. And with these sort of blades with that heavy camber, and you're just really ripping the material off and you're not looking for a smooth finish, because this is essentially your scrub plane or your foreplane, the plane that comes before that does the roughing work. So you don't have to actually sharpen these very often. I've heard that some people say they've had ones like this or a scrub plane in their shop for 2-3 years and not sharpened it, and they use it quite regularly. So if you're taking big heavy shavings like that off, it's going to be easier to cut it if it's sharper, but even if it's quite blunt, it's still going to just smash the timber off. And that's the beauty of that arc. It allows you to reach in and take that heavy shaving, and the outside edges of the blade don't make contact, so you're taking it in a small section to do it. If you'd like to see another great video such as this one here today, please check out one of the relevant videos left here on the screen. Bye for now.